How can you deal with your fungal diseases? Learn more from Glen Rabenberg in this Soil Works episode focused on correcting the cause to fungal disease pressure. It is always cheaper to correct the cause than react to the symptoms.
This is the SoilWorks Correct the Cause podcast featuring Glen Rabenberg and brought to you by SoilWorks and Acres, U.S.A. Thank you for joining us again in the SoilWorks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Slabaugh. In the first episode, we went through compaction issues. In this episode, we're going to talk about fungal diseases, again with Glen Rabenberg. Glen's going to join us for every episode in this series. Our goal for the second episode will be to help you determine the symptoms of fungal diseases, what causes them, and how to correct those causes, all in about 9 minutes or less, so we better get busy. Glen, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thank you.
First question, very pertinent these days. How do weather patterns influence disease pressure?
Oh boy, that's a good question. And the answer is absolutely yes. If you have cool, overcast, cloudy, wet conditions, that is the absolute perfect growing environment for, and I'm just going to call any of these fungal diseases, they're all part of the same scumbag family. And they enjoy a warm, wet, high humid environment. So weather patterns absolutely, definitely increase disease pressure regarding fungal problems, yes.
Thank you. So yes, weather patterns do influence disease pressure. Second question, will a good crop rotation reduce fungal disease?
This is going to sound like a political answer, but I'm going to say very doubtful. And what we've seen is, and there is good science that has researched the different nutrients that different plants need and the different root composition and the different root exudates. All plants are primarily made up of the same substances, and by rotating them, what's happening is the disease is showing up in the plant, but guess what? The problem is down below that. And, there's an old saying that the old timers would say, it's like if they're dealing with a problem, they'll say, you know what, we got to get to the root of this problem. And many times what is shown topically on top of the soil, all these diseases have a common denominator that there's something not right within the soil. So in most cases, if there's a deficiency or a lack of air or a lack of microbes, a crop rotation normally won't give the results that a grower is looking for just with a crop rotation.
As far as our crops go, is there a certain phase or time where they are more susceptible to fungal diseases?
Every disease, whether it be in an animal or a human or a plant or soil or a microbe, every disease has an incubation period. And many times a problem will start in the soil sometimes 3 to 15 days before the symptoms are shown in the plant. And one of the biggest problems we see, and it doesn't matter what crop you're working with in any type of soil on any part of the planet, what we find is when a plant is going into reproduction, that's the first hard pulling that plant will do on the soil. And I'll back up just a little bit. The first growth phase, there isn't much demand from the soil, and that's a good time to start building and healing the soil. And what we see is Goss's wilt, sudden death. A lot of these diseases are showing up right at reproduction, because the plant is now requiring nutrients that it needs from the soil, and the soil isn't quite ready to supply them at the level the plant wants, so it tells us that it's not happy and healthy.
Okay, so we know weather patterns influence fungal diseases and our crops. Good crop rotations aren't a silver bullet. Plants are more susceptible around reproduction to fungal disease, so let's get down to it. How do we correct the cause?
Well, a fungal disease is usually not because of a deficiency of a fungicide. A fungicide will react to the symptoms of the unhealthy plant, which is really coming from the soil being unhealthy. Now, a lot of guys will look at their soil test and they will determine what they need to grow a plant, but the plant really isn't made out of much of the minerals in the soil. A plant's job is to grab sunlight, water, and minerals and make sugar. And the sugar can be monitored and measured with a refractometer by squeezing the sap or the blood out of the plant. And this sap or blood will tell the carbon and oxygen content of that plant. And if that plant is under 8 Brix or 8% sugar, it is susceptible to every fungal disease that's going to come in on the next wind. So that's one way, that's one part, I should say, to look at. The other thing we use is an EC meter, which is an electrical conductivity meter, kind of like measuring the heartbeat. And there needs to be enough electricity in the soil to move the nutrients where they need to be. And then the third meter we always use is a penetrometer, making sure that air can get into the soil and the microbes' exhalation of CO2 can be released. So checking plant health before the problem can correct the cause rather than reacting to the symptoms of unhealthy soil.
Thank you, Glenn. To review, fungal disease pressure peaks during the reproductive stages, is influenced by your weather patterns. If it's under 8 Brix, it's very susceptible. Good specific there. Anyway, checking your plant health before the problem is really the key here to correcting the cause of fungal diseases. Thank you, Glenn. And Glenn, how'd I do?
I tell you what, you've got a great memory. You nailed it.
Thank you, Glenn. You can stay with us while we're on this roll to listen to episode 3 coming up, which will help you correct the cause of your tilling issues. Thanks from Soilworks, Glen Rabenberg, and everyone here at Acres USA. Find those causes and get them corrected.